Want to welcome to the Social Yet Distance. Today, we're going to do an interview and talk with Scot Young, who's released. They said I wasn't college material, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, and then we'll get started with Scott here in a few minutes. I'm going to read a couple of quotes uh, about the book taken from the book. And they said I wasn't college material. Scot Young walks the reader through a coming of age tale. The back seat of cars, 5-card stud, cigarettes, and the first drink of Colt 45. Young doesn't run at you with the screaming discovery of an empty touch. Rather, he invites the reader to glide with him into a world that only extends gentle invitations. Young's new book, They Said I Wasn't College Material, is good enough for nightstands, airplane rides, and to sip warm drinks with someone when he or she is cold. Enjoy. And that's from Bill Gaynor, probably one of the best respected poets in the country. I also got this quote here. It says, They Said I Wasn't College Material by Scot Young is a collection that spans time and circumstances by a poet who is willing to resurrect the sting of assumptions and expectations to turn the lens in the other direction. He challenges social gatekeeping and the classist label culture that nurtures the privileged and pushes the rest of us towards their service. He understands what feeds self-doubt and steers destiny away from us, and he goes after the source. This is not the same as holding up the glass. And that's from Lynn Alexander, the co-founder and editor of Collapse Press. We're going to interview with Scott in just a few minutes. I'll leave you with this quote and then we'll take care of a little bit of business. This quote is one you've all probably heard. In spite of ourselves, we will end up sitting on a rainbow against all odds. Honey, we're the big door prize. And that's John Prine, a big favorite of Scott's, and many other poets of similar stature and time in space. Let me take care of a little business. We are in a great experience with Scott. Meanwhile, we do have business expenses. We have supporters for those efforts, and we don't make the big YouTube bucks yet because we don't have the audience available. However, to support our efforts, we do have affiliate business arrangements that can offer you guys as the audience and as the community discounts and prices and special events and things like that. Take a look at our buy me a coffee page for all the details. I will put descriptions and links for all of our relationships in the description of this movie or this video movie. Oh, it's going to be that good. Thanks. Be patient and we'll be back with Scott. Welcome to the Social Yet Distance. I'm Jack, and I'd like to introduce today's Mr. Scot Young, who is a good friend, a mentor of sorts, and a person to be seen, known, loved by as many as I know do. And I hope that you'll take the time to enjoy this afternoon with us. Scott, welcome, my friend.
Hi, Jack.
So we're here to celebrate the release of this new book. They say I wasn't college material. There it is. It's a beautiful book. And our buddy did the artwork, didn't it? Ray?
Yeah, Ray did.
Yeah, Ray
He,
Sweeney did the work. Check out his work as well, folks. Ray Sweeney, he's a master artist and has all kind of stuff for sale to support his efforts as well. We're all about the indie artists, so please go and see Ray.
he's a great
Beautiful
guy.
cover, beautiful cover. I get the nature of the title from my own personal experience. They pretty much say you're not college material when you're sitting in prison. So I learned that the hard way. I think that you've learned it a little bit different way, Scott. Tell us a little bit about how this book came together.
Well, this book is a collection of poems that probably dates back to 1989 up until 22, I think, maybe 23. And the title came out of when I was 18, I believe, or 17. I was sitting in the high school counselor's office, and the man said, he said, "So what plans do you have?" I said, "I'd like to go to Berkeley." He goes, "What?" I said, "Berkeley." Because at the time that was the place. Hey, let's get out of Missouri and let's go to San Francisco. And he says, "Have you ever thought about building cars at Claycomo, Missouri, Ford's?" And I went, "No." And he said, "I really don't think college is for you." He said, "That's not your aptitude." And I went, "Oh, okay." So uh, I graduated that semester and we went to college because when that someone tells you no, uh, if you're like me, you're going to prove that person wrong. Well, I only went to college for uh, the social aspect of it. So I didn't study, and I made the same grades in college that I made in high school, which were C's and some D's. But uh, so a few years later, after I got married, this was probably 1988. Then uh, I had about 100 hours of previous play in college, and so I wanted to go back. Uh, and I wanted to quit construction and go back to college and become a teacher. So I walked in the dean's office of this particular school and I said, "I want to be a teacher." He goes, "Do you have transcripts?" And I said, "Yes, sir." Handed those to him, and he kind of looked down at me over the top of his glasses, and he goes, "You know what your grade point is?" And I went, "You tell me." He said 2.0, and I just beamed because to me, a C average was that's not bad. And he says, "You need 14 hours of A's to even be provisionally admitted to our school." I said, "Okay." He goes, "You have a 106 hours. You don't have any A's." I said, "I didn't need them then." And he kind of chuckled. And I thought, "Bastard, I'll be back." So I enrolled for 14 hours, made straight A's. Granted, I was uh, in my 30s then, so I was a lot smarter than I was at 17. And uh, then I went back and he goes, "You got to have 15 more hours now to be fully admitted." I thought, "God, is this ever going to end?" And so I did that and I became a teacher then finally. So, you know, there was a professor along the way who wrote a book, and it was on. His name was William Glasser, and Glasser
Mm,
said that no one can motivate you. The motivation comes from within.
mhm.
Well, I think he's right, but that slug in that dean's office motivated me by telling me you're not college material. And
Right.
so my rebel mind said, "I'll prove you wrong." So I did. So I think Glasser was right, but I also, there was an outside force telling me I couldn't. And so my inside force said, "Screw you, I can too."
That's funny. I
Uh,
have a vague memory of studying some of William Glasser's stuff in psychology during my training for addiction
mhm.
counseling. And I don't remember anything about it really, but As soon as you knew that, as soon as you mentioned the name, it kind of made me chuckle. You know, school in general and college, especially for me, was always a bit of a distraction and a bit of it was such a requirement in my environment that I resented it from the word go. And based on that resentment, I became a little bit rebellious and started getting in trouble in a lot, at a very young age, and spent a lot of time in some schools of a different color, like school in the youth detention center, which is basically, teenage prison. Um, GED classes, lots of those,
Sure.
things like that. So I got my education on paper from these unique locations, but they were never a place where I ended up in places like that because I felt like, for whatever reason, I wasn't qualified either. And I was told that same
Sure.
message. And so the idea of college, for example, I wasn't in the whole social scene of college didn't appeal to me unless we were going to go to Athens and go to UGA and listen to REM and a bunch of cool rock and roll bands in the 80s. That
Hmm.
wasn't me. It wasn't enough of a draw. But what it did do was it became a distraction from what was really going on around me. And I wonder if that's something that you saw in your teaching, or if that applies in your case at all, or if you were just driven by that idea of, oh, I can't, okay, watch this.
I think when I first started teaching, I thought it was all about me. Uh, and at some point, after I quit teaching and became a principal, I still thought it was all about me. And then I was bored. I had like 120 teachers and and stuff, and 1,500 kids. But I was bored, so I thought I'm going to teach a class.
Mhm.
And so I told the counselors, I said, I'm going to teach creative writing class. Uh, put me some kids in there. Well, they did. And in my mind at that period of time, I thought I was going to get all of the special kids, the great kids, the football players that had a high IQ, the cheerleaders, the doctors' kids, blah, blah, blah. I had every broken soul in that school in that class. And I walked in that day and I went, oh Lord, how am I going to teach these kids? And after the first day, I figured it out. And it was the best class I ever had. They they were all abused or broken, and then I found these kids need somebody to believe in them. So every other class that I taught from that period on, either as a principal or superintendent, I said to the counselors, "Give me every broken kid you have." They go, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah," because they have a story to tell, and I'm going to teach them how to tell it. And uh, so that was my rebirth or my awakening that education is not about me. It's about these kids that don't have squat or have been beaten down by parents and society. They don't have a chance. And so that turned into my mission. And uh, that's when I became a big boy.
Yeah, I think being not ready for our or being not college material is actually kind of a blessing as far as I'm concerned. Um,
Hmm.
that being said, but I hear the progression that parallels mine in that me, unhappy, bored, boom, what do we do next? You know, and and that changes you. when you open up your mind and open up your heart and you realize it's not about you at all, or that the degree it is about you is on a much deeper level,
Sure.
um, then those rewards and changes just start flowing through. And I love you, brother. I've watched what you do, and that was the first thing that ever drew to me to you, other than, I mean, obviously your words are what they are, but um that's you in everything that you do, whether it's your personal, your family, your community of poets, you give 100%, and it's not for your result or your outcome. And that is the way I would like to live. And it serves a great model for all of us. So blah, blah, blah. Um, okay, you'll come back. I know. Um, do this. Let's hear some poetry. Let's see where that progression took you.
Okay, let's start with the title. It's called Glasser's Motivation Theory, and this is a Japanese form of poetry, I guess. Anyway, it reads: Teachers didn't pull any punches in the 60s and 70s. Not everybody got a blue ribbon, and this was way before the happy face stickers were manufactured. Red ink was the color of the day. My grade card read like a juvenile rap sheet. Does not behave well in the cafeteria,
That was
not
me.
working up to his potential, will not take no for an answer. That one was handwritten in the comments section by my second grade teacher, Mrs. Blah, 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 bless her little heart. I remember in my junior high bowling league, I did get an I tried trophy. Boy, that was a big deal. My high school counselor said when I asked about going to Berkeley that I should work construction or maybe a factory job building Fords in Claycomo. They said I was not college material. Almost believed them.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Man.
Uh,
Scott, before you move on,
this,
you just told the story and then you read the poem, and it was so concise and beautiful. Having the background, it all makes sense. And in our discussion, you know, what I was alluding to is there's always somebody who makes a difference. Somebody like me or you who steps in, not steps in, but makes themselves available to the need, whatever it is. And there was, I had teachers like that. And I'm curious if in the classroom that's the way you were as well. Um, for example, Virginia Burke recognized the fact that I had some acting skills, and she pursued that, and she pushed that, and she saw where my pros and cons were, and she gave me opportunities, and she let me drive her 1971 Corvette in the parking lot, which was really cool. um, but I don't think my school experience after that would have been the same. You know,
mhm,
Mrs. Brakebill willingly accepted my David Cassidy-ishness, when I'm 10 years old or whatever. And, just let me ride with that, like fed my ego that because I needed it
sure.
at that point in my life, you know. So talk a little bit about that connection with the kids, because I know it changed my life.
Got some poems about some of the kids in this book. Uh, it's it's heartbreaking. Uh, it's hard on your family life because in essence you have another family,
Hmm.
and that's these kids, and their parents, some of their parents that you do get to know. So you're juggling your school family and staff, not just kids, but teachers too. Uh, I had a kindergarten teacher first day of school. She came to my office crying, and she goes, "I can't do this." And I said, "Why?" And she told me how one of the little girls came and told her that this big long story about how her mommy's boyfriend, she's shooting up drugs, told her that if she ever came into his room again, he would have his Doberman chew her face off. This girl was 6, and so there was drugs in the family that was used out in the open, not in any private. And she had some slug there who was threatened a 6-year-old girl, and so the little child was crying, the teacher was crying. They made the hotline call, uh, and I said, do you remember during our in-service training what I said?" And she goes, "I guess." And I said, "You were put here for a reason." I said, "You became a teacher for a reason." I said, "That little girl is your reason."
Mhm.
So she took a big breath and sucked it up. She goes, "I'll try." And I said, it's okay to cry. You can go home and cry, but you got to be here for her because nobody else is.
Mhm.
So, you know, I don't even know where we started at, but the whole what affects you from your job at school is not just a 6-year-old kid, it's a 22-year-old
Mhm.
teacher. And so then, most days when I came home, my wife goes, "How'd things go today at school?" And she wanted to talk about it. And I go, "Fine." Yeah, because I don't want to rehash it because it's tough. And I've
Is
always taught mainly in poor schools, except for the school that I had 1,500 in. But still, there were poor there. And at that school, it was uh, diverse. So you had, you just didn't have poor white kids. You had poor black children who didn't even compare to the level of poverty as the poor white kids, because the
Mhm.
poor white kids still had advantage
Right.
because
I
they
listen,
were white.
I'm one of those kids too. I am no different than any of those kids, except for I was in privileged schools. My own mentality and my own environment and my own home circumstances and, whatever, um, created the kid that I was. And it made me behave the way I did. You were laughing about, I was laughing about the report card, shows self-control. I failed every single report card I ever got. Shows no self-control. And you have to find a place to get rid of all that at some point. And I'm wondering if poetry, if you ended up in poetry through that growth period, or was that a part of it before, during, after, as it, you
I
know,
I ended up in poetry in 1972. My high school teacher gave us a mimeograph copy of "It's Raining in Love" by Richard Brodigan, and it was like, "Oh, that's me." And this particular teacher cared about her kids. I can't say that any other teacher I had at that school did. Uh, it was just a job. But anyway, so it all started there, and then I wrote poems there, and then when I left there, I probably didn't write another poem uh, till the '80s, and I graduated in '73. Went to college, played around, finally got married, got divorced, got remarried and just still married to that lady, and so I don't know. It's just poetry came from high school creative writing class, and I had a poet friend the other day talking to another poet friend on Facebook, and this first guy said, "I didn't write a poem for years and years." He said, "When I was married and happy, I never wrote a word."
Mhm.
And the other poet said, "I've never been either one of those," which is like, oh wow, never been happy. And I had kids in my classes that had never been happy. And I just talked to one yesterday, and she graduated last year, and I think I posted her poem again. But she was extremely happy, and she went through trauma and abuse, sexual abuse, I guess. And it, her last year of high school, she changed her name, first name,
Hmm.
last name, uh, got adopted by I think her grandparents. But anyway, she changed her name, which put that trauma behind her in her mind. And she's in college. She's writing poems, and she said poetry is saving her life. So
You
that's
know,
kind of cool.
in our circle of friends, that's such a common story. Um,
Hmm.
Regardless of what the trauma or the experience may have been, virtually everybody I could think of that's related to poetry that on Facebook, for example, that's a friend of
Hmm.
mine, um, talks about the healing power of the words, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. I don't, and I, I'm animate about the fact that these words need to be here and they need to be heard and they need to make sure we need to make sure as people who love them that they are always here in the future for those who come long after we do because we never know what's going to happen.
No,
Um,
you don't.
so, we share this mission together, my brother, change some lives and let the words do its magic as well. Did poetry, I mean, a creative writing course doesn't just include poetry. Was that the schema for you, or did you do other types of like writing flash or fiction or that kind of stuff?
Um, I wrote some fiction when I was still a kid, I guess, probably 18. Uh, when I went back to college, no, this was the first round. Uh, First fiction piece that I wrote was after I graduated, and my cousin and I and some friends took a trip to Negril, Jamaica in 1973, and
Woohoo!
did and did all the stuff that you do in Jamaica when you're free. And I wrote a story about it, but I fantasized a little bit because I met a girl there from Savannah, Georgia, little blonde. She was my mind, and so I included her in the story, and it was all fiction. Uh, and then my mother found it, and she read it, and she goes, "Oh my goodness!" She's going because she thought it was all true, and I went, "Hmm, that's good." Uh, Next fiction piece I wrote was when I was in Springfield, Missouri, at Southwest Missouri State, and I wrote a piece of a sexual exploit nature about the girl who lived down the hall. Now that was probably mostly all true, and I turned that into my professor, uh, Dr. Beckett, and he knew the other girl too, and for so then he told me he said you're the best writer that's ever come through this Paul or this, but I think he got off on the story what it was. It wasn't couldn't have been that
That's
good.
funny.
But anyway,
Well, you know, the very
I,
first story I ever wrote that I recall, I was probably 6, and I sat down with my little blue horse notebook and my big fat pencil and wrote about Freddie the rat and how the boy in the story was in jail in a moral dilemma, and he was tormented by the moral question of should he starve to death or should he eat Freddie the rat, his friend? Not that I was twisted at any
it was
point in my
twisted at
life.
6.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, I
So that's
don't write
good.
much fiction anymore. I just live that. Give us a couple more poems before we bastardize your time too much, Scott.
Okay. This one was called Day One, 19 Day One. 1972, teenage sex under a cheesy moon, 8-track plays Froshi low, time in a bottle, sets the mood, top down, gives us more room. You borrowed your sister's 28 days of Kama Sutra. We had 20 minutes before the porch light came on. I prayed for 27 more days, just like this one. That's a kid poem.
That's a good one, though.
Uh, this is I'm going to skip back to this one. It is about a student I had a couple years ago, maybe, and you've probably seen this one, but I'll read it. It's called "After Breakfast: The Last Day of School."
Love it.
JC sat in my office, buried his head in his hands, sobbing between dropping the F bomb. Said some kid looked at him wrong, called him a effing psycho. He said it's getting worse, and it's been like this his whole life. And every father he's ever had called him worthless. Before I made the call, he made a gun with his hand, pulled it, put a finger to his temple, and said, "This is how it ends today. Screw this." I lied to him and said, "It will get better when he gets older. Just give it time." He looked up with nothing in his eyes and pulled the trigger.
Man, yeah, every time, man, every time.
And he wasn't the only kid, is the thing. If that was the only kid that had problems in that small school with a graduating class of 15, 12 of them were just like that.
And you know, those in power wander around and say, "Oh, what happened?" Pointing fingers. You know, it's a sad story. I could talk all day about that.
I
Um,
have I had a teacher at that school, and he had retired, and he came back to teach. He came from Oklahoma, I believe, and he was probably a couple of years ago. He was probably 69, which is what I am now, but he had taught forever, and he loved kids, and he was a great teacher. And he said, "I'll do whatever you have." So I found him a spot, and I got to know him pretty well. And he married his high school sweetheart. And this poem, excuse me, it is about them. So if you ever have known anyone who has died or dying of Alzheimer, that's what this poem is. It's called Love Song for Kathy and Craig. Her ability to speak in complete sentences is almost gone. Holding hands, they went for a quiet walk along the shore of Table Rock Lake. When she said, "What is your name?" he answered, "Craig." "What is yours?" "Kathy," she replied. It was that moment somewhere in the 1950s when she was a little girl on a puppy date that he will always hold in his heart. The conversation ended holding hands, as did her complete sentences. He said he remembers when they were two kids working at Silver Dollar City with the whole world laid out in front of them, the light in her eyes, as if it would never end. That was tough to read.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. I uh I can only imagine what it might be like to go through that from either side of that fence.
Sure.
Very, very, very well represented, Scott. Thank you for sharing that.
I don't know how in the world they did it, but
Yeah, it's kind of an
today,
amazing thing.
hmm, yeah,
The
and
humans,
yeah, I've gone through it not in that degree, but with a brother and with in-laws and stuff like that, and it's not what you want to watch.
mm-mm.
You know,
Well, yeah, I'm not, I can't say that I've been too close to it. Um, but I've watched a lot of people uh, have to dance their way through a lot of different problems. So I can only imagine,
hmm.
you know.
Oh, sure, yeah,
Um, well, thanks for that, Scott. That's a beautiful piece. And why don't we go ahead and I don't want to take much more of your time. You want to
okay.
pick out a whiz bang to close us out?
I got one that will close out, and this one got some acclaim on the Red Fizz. I don't know, they picked it out, you know, as I don't know, the net, best of the net or something. I'm not sure. This is also about a child that I had in class. It's called She Only Wants. She says her parents loved her so much they divorced. So at 14, she walks 3 miles down a dirt road, drive her grandparents home from the bar that turned into all day. When her dad moved close by before going back to the pen, she would have her friends over. He would send her out on the four-wheeler. Said she was a cock blocker. She had to Google that one. She believes the boys think she's pretty when she goes braless at school, but behind her back they chant limericks that rhyme with her last name. The last assignment was to write a poem titled What I Want in Life. She turned hers in within minutes, punctuated with a heart. I only want what you want.
That's such a beautiful piece. I love hearing that one every single time.
Yeah.
And it feels a lot more hopeful and positive than some of the others. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, yeah. Uh, yeah. I don't think she came out of that mindset, but anyway, she was
one can
smart.
hope.
So she might.
One can,
Sometimes
yeah.
it takes us a while, doesn't it, Jack?
Well, I know I banged my head against the wall for
It took me a while.
probably 20 years longer than I needed to. So yeah, I've
Anyway,
been known to give a little
that
slack to the kids.
that book was published by Roadside Press,
Hmm.
Michelle with one L, and it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and
Roadside Press,
bookshop.org, and pals
Roadside Press has a shop.
everywhere.
It's on the
Uh,
roadside shop press too, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, and magicaljeep.com, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Well,
So,
thanks so much, Scott. You and I can do this anytime you want, man. Just sit here. We don't have to necessarily record it, but I
sure.
appreciate you coming by and sharing your words with us. And much more than that, I appreciate you as a human and for all the effort that you've put into your life and the people that you have around you. And you've
Well,
built quite a community, and that's based on the result of the heart that you carry with you. And
I thank you, Jack, and I thank you especially for what you what you do for poets, and it's probably unmatched. And uh, you deserve some, some applause because you're doing it for free, and that says
no, I'm
something.
not. I'm going to tell you guys where the sponsors are later.
All right, a good deal.
I would spread Scott Young's words for free forever for until the end of time. So, and that is to the purpose of socialyadistance.com is to make sure that those words never get lost. So please help us in that mission. Scott, thank you so much. I hope that you audience, Mr. and Mrs. Audience, that you enjoyed your
Sure.
afternoon with us and that you'll come back and visit us more. Thanks so much.
But thank you, Jack.
Thank you.